Welcome to Design Thinking Games, a fantasy and user experience podcast. Each episode, your podcast hosts, Tim Broadwater and Michael Schofield, will examine the player experience of board games, pen and paper role-playing games, live-action games, mobile games, and video games. You can find every episode, including this one, on your podcatcher of choice and on the web at designthinkinggames.com.
On our first episode, I think, you mentioned something that I thought was, I don't know, it kind of caught my attention and really piqued my interest. You'd mentioned a game that early in your life, gave you the options for, I think, the first time for you to really identify with a specific character. You specifically had sort of a lilt in your voice about, I don't know, around that kind of that identity aspect, this idea that in games you can become or at least see yourself represented. I really wanted to explore this idea with you about gaming and identity. And I'm curious, when you probably don't remember because, we don't talk about these. We try to keep a little bit of mystery between episodes. So you probably don't remember the exact case or thing you were talking about at the time, but I want to hear you talk about this. I want to hear why to me, why I interpreted this as being something that seemed like really important to you.
I guess when I kind of think about it, the type of games that I love or gravitate towards, let's say that, are games to where I think I can bring something creative to it. It's important, kind of for me to not just have an enjoyable game that's fun to play, but what I love about games that I seem to really gravitate towards is when it allows me to do, create and bring strategy kind of into the game and make my own thing, right? And I think the game that you're specifically talking about was Hero Quest, and that was the first board game that I ever played that is like the training wheels version of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Like D&D is super difficult. It has a high learning curve. It is a lot, right? But it was the first way that I kind of got I guess a taste or exposure to hey, this is what being a game master is like, or a dungeon master, right? And it gives you kind of guidelines that you can follow, and then different scenarios that are triggered by different antecedents or triggers, or and then the game can go kind of multiple ways. I believe it was Hero Quest. Is that correct?
That rings true. Is it more? What about the aspect of creating a character that you inhabit, whether it's Hero Quest, D&D, Dragon Age? How important is that to you?
I guess what's very important to me is total creativity and kind of control within parameters, right? I guess what it makes me think of is Heroes Quest gave you parameters. It's here's all the minis, here's the maps, kind of here's the stories and the techniques and the spells and stuff, and you can kind of create your own stories, right? And that's cool. With Dungeons and Dragons, I can choose my race and my classes and my feats, and then build out something unique that is for me. So I have a character, let's say in Pathfinder Society First Edition, who's literally a gnome who is a summoner, and she rides her summon into battle, and she has a lance, and that's something that I can customize and specifically build to where it's like, hey, I kind of want, my summoner to be kind of work with their summon or their pet or whatever, right? And so in that regards, I was like, okay, so I'm going to make her ride skills really well so she can like dodge attacks easily from the saddle. I'm going to make her sacrifice her feats so she can give feats to her summon. It's just a system that has parameters that lets me kind of customize a build or a trick or a gimmick or a strategy, right? And that's more like the tabletop swerve, I guess, on it. But for me, I guess that's what I like about Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, right? Is that in Pokemon I can build a bear team, or I can build a poison team, or I can build I have a team in Pokemon, and I've been playing Pokemon since Gen 1. And the video game, not the card game, not any of the spin-off crap games, but legit Pokemon. And I've been transferring my Pokemon from like Game Boy to Game Boy Advance to DS to 3DS to Switch. And I have the Pokemon Bank, which is I think called Pokemon Home now, and I pay a yearly fee to house all my Pokemon because I have a 3 evolution bird team that's named after Decepticons. So that are literally named after like jet Decepticons from Gen 1. So like Skywarp and Thundercracker and and like all these and so I can go online and be like, I built this team 5 years ago and I can still battle today. And I guess it's the same with like Magic the Gathering. Like, yes, in tournament play you're limited to type 2 or type 1, which is like just the last 2 expansions, right? But essentially Magic the Gathering, the appeal is that you're a wizard, you're building your spell book however you want. The deck, or like the deck building, card deck drafting, whatever you want to call it, strategy is like you're bringing a spell book into battle. What do you want it to be? And so I still have decks that are my favorite decks that I fine-tuned, played against people in love, and they're not legal for type 2 play, in tournaments, but for friends who play like, hey, all Magic generations work. I have a Flying City spell book that literally lets me summon walls, make them fly, and make them attack. Yeah, and it keeps going. I can name like tons of games that I gravitate to or like enjoy, but it's that. It lets me, I can quickly understand the mechanics, understand the fair battlefield or the playground, I guess, and the fair physics and balance. And then I can work within that system, right? Within those parameters to make my own thing and try it out. So I don't know what that is necessarily. I don't know if that's like, you can call it card drafting or deck building for like Magic. And then when you look at Pokemon, it's just like team building and battling, but it's kind of having that, in lack of a better word, a constrained sandbox or parameter game to where I can build and create stuff. And I hate Minecraft. Like, people say like Minecraft is like, oh, it's great, you can build stuff, and I'm like, it's work.
That was going to be my next question. I was like, oh man, you must love Minecraft.
No, I totally hate Minecraft.
What's the difference? Like, clearly there is an obvious difference between a Magic the Gathering and a Minecraft, but in the spirit of, loosely defined sandbox where you can do anything, ? What about Minecraft doesn't appeal to you?
So, like, I just don't want... I get that you can create your own server and you can have friends come on and you can build and you can battle, or you can play the game and fend off dead, and you can make your own hideout and cool stuff. And it's like this creative space you log on to that's kind of like a clubhouse, or what a lot of people now use with the Oculus and PlayStation VR, like a VR chat. It's like a social hangout thing, and I'm not about that, I guess. Like, I'm here to like kick ass, or like I have a purpose. I want to destroy the other player, or I'm, in my I have a background that comes from fighting games. I love like Street Fighter and Eternal Champions and Mortal Kombat, and we talked about that in previous episodes. So I guess it's also the layer of competition or that competitiveness added to it, right?
That makes sense.
So having that with Magic the Gathering, you're fighting another wizard or multiple wizards. With Pokemon, you're fighting another Pokemon trainer. Even if you applied it to an MMORPG, like one of my favorite MMORPGs, and I will say is the best superhero MMORPG that was ever created, was City of Heroes. And what was phenomenal about City of Heroes is that you had more than any game I've ever known in the history of gaming, 100% control over your costume and everything. And then you had customizable powers. You like basically could get like a power set, but you can make it look like whatever you want.
Oh, awesome.
And so essentially with the combination of your costume, writing your bio, and your backstory, which people can see when they click on you in the game, and being able to customize your powers, you literally could make Wolverine. You could make Avatar, The Last Airbender, or you could make your own thing. And so what I loved about that is that the story connects to the costume, which connects to the power, which is completely customizable. And so when you're in the game and you see someone who's like created something really cool and unique and it's awesome, there's like kind of respect there. The same thing with, you know, characters in tabletop role-playing games or Pokemon teams, or even like when we talked about games to where you can control your costumes and build out custom perks and make your characters have combos to where like my character can heal but they can also hide, or you know, I like that kind of that customization, because it lets me bring not just my creativity but strategy and test out things to it, if that makes sense.
What is the role of performance as applied to this customization? What you're describing to me is that you have complete control in which to demonstrate to other players, whether that's like whooping their ass or showing off the character that you built. Is it this? Do you have like the same feelings in the case of something that's not player versus player or player with player, but like player versus world, something like a Red Dead Redemption, where you have a huge sandbox, except you're not building your own character really, and there's nothing performative about it. You are just existing in the sandbox.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so I don't care if it's collaborative or competitive. In that regards, I do like playing with other people. Mm-hmm. Like the board games that I gravitate to the most are quick startup tabletop board games that are collaborative, to where we're all working together to get a goal or we all die, which right. is, you know, kind of like there's a bunch of games out there,
sure,
like Castle Defender, or there's also, you know, kind of Forbidden Desert or Forbidden Island, where you're all trying to get off the island before it sinks, but I can't customize or be creative about what I bring to the table.
Yeah.
So what I would like is, hey, if we're competing against each other or we're, you know, collaborating together, that's fine. I think you need the other people, of course, and that's something I'm not much into solo games, unless it's just like, hey, this is a complete open world thing. You can sink hours into it and just explore and have fun, which is like Zelda Breath of the Wild or Ghost of Tsushima or Mad Max. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, it's not meant to be played with anyone else. It's just you're logging into a completely open world and doing that. And I like those games, but I love the games that allow me to creatively build and strategize my character or monster or team or whatever, and then compete against other players or collaborate with other players to accomplish large goals, or stuff like that.
Yeah, it's fundamentally social. And you also know that these other players they also have the exact same powers of customization, the same choices for the most part. And so
Monster Hunter is very much like this, because Monster Hunter has so many weapons and so many sets of armor, and then you can give yourself abilities, and you can also build decorations and charms that you put on your armor that give you special effects. And so you could really make yourself, like, I'm going to make my armor, my weapons, and my effects or charms or decorations all make me max damage, so I can just do more damage than anyone else. Or you could make them to where, status effects don't affect me or don't stick to me, so I never get knocked unconscious, or I never get dizzy, or I never, and that's that open system that operates in the same parameters in which we all kind of the laws that we obey. That I enjoy, and I don't actually know if there's a gaming term for it. This is my naivety or ignorance here, to where I don't know. I know what deck building is, so I can apply it to there, but I don't know, like, custom battle arenas or MOBAs or what they're referred to.
Yeah, that's interesting. We legit just had a discussion yesterday afternoon at work where one of our early users expressed interest in being able to customize something. Like, it doesn't matter what, right? The idea is that there are a number of objects or models within any kind of software as a service. And in this case, these folks we have a lot of research that shows hey, they want to do this with that or that with that. I had another experience where I'm using this because this is on one hand a UX podcast. I'm using this tool that that we're kind of a tester for, called UpFocus, and it's just a place to manage feedback. And I just got emailed earlier today questioning why we're not using such and such features, and why we are in fact using the features that we are using in a very specific way. You can't, or maybe you shouldn't, or you should, in the design of a thing, you should assume that people want to use it however they want. The job to be done might be, catalog some research, but the approach to how that job is completed is either really constrained, which is the use case, I think, for most apps. The workflow is built in, and you do this and this and this, and that's what it is. But there's an opportunity that I hadn't been thinking about until yesterday, honestly, and it was reinforced by this email I got from UpFocus this morning. That doesn't have to be the case. How might we design for a wide variety of customization? Why are the constraints that we designed into the first build of a thing even present? Are they necessary? Are they technical constraints? And we admitted that they weren't. I don't know what the term for this is either. It's some sort of degree of wiggle room, right, within the use of a service, whether that service is a game that you're experiencing, or some sort of tool.
So this tool you're talking about, UpFocus, is that the name of it?
Yeah.
Does it allow people to request features and vote on them? Is that how it works? Or?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I did. I was like, hey, we're using this tool in this way that you did not expect. Can we have features that allow us, I think, diverge from the original design more? I don't know. It's kind of it's sort of like a user experience version of that Muhammad Ali quote that, your best plans, all plans are out the window when you get punched in the face, or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's something about the deliberate design of I imagine a game, but kind of in our world, an app or some other digital service, where you either assume in the build that people are going to use it exactly as you intend, or you don't. And I think the former is the default. So this, like, I've always been in awe of these games that are fundamentally creative and co-creative, because it's funny, the lack of vocabulary to describe that kind of openness is huge, but I imagine there has to be some industry terms for that, because they're not going to do anything for the most part that allows you to break the games. There are real deliberate design decisions behind letting you customize the powers in City of Heroes, right? Or something like that, in a way that keeps it fair and equitable and technologically feasible. And that is a style of design that is suddenly really interesting to me. And to your point, I don't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, you know what this makes me think of? I've worked for years now in enterprise software applications, right? And one of the things that we dealt with years ago, and we still, to some degree, deal with when we are designing, for these giant, enterprise software applications. I mean, essentially, and all giant enterprise software applications are dashboards and tables. That's literally it. Now you're crudding like off the tables and searching the tables and stuff, you know what I mean? But it's essentially dashboards and tables. That's every single enterprise software application. And the thing that we encountered a lot of the times is that when we would bring, here's a marketing person, here's a business analyst, here's a subject matter expert, here's an end user, a dev, whoever, or CEO of the company, we brought them into meetings. They would all argue about what columns of these tables are relevant to them and what they need. And it's like, an operator will use this, and it's like, yeah, but a mechanic will never use it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, the accountant needs this, and it's just like, yeah, but no operator would ever use that. And so so I guess something that we implemented, and now we kind of do it all the time for any kind of software enterprise applications we work on, is that because we think it's also kind of expected from any user, exactly like what you're saying, that there is this level of wiggle room or customization that in every user kind of expects there to be in the UI. That every table has a pattern that has a gear on it in the top right, essentially. And that when you click on that gear, you just get a flyout of a bunch of things mm-hmm. that have checkboxes on them. And those checkboxes literally are the columns.
Yeah.
So you can turn on and turn off whatever columns you want, or you can drag the columns to reorder them. It sounds so small and easy and not a big thing, but I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in to where we're just like, we have to be able to fit all 14 columns on the screen. And it's just like, well, I don't know what devices your users have, but unless they have a monitor that is 3,000 pixels wide, they're not going to get it. And it's like, well, we need to make the font smaller then, or we need to shrink it. And it's just like, that's in what we're basically, what the user expectation is now is that there is baked into every application, web app, enterprise software application, that you have these customization, the basic lowest level of customization and wiggle room that you can afford to your end user, right? So turning on or turning off column rows or reorganizing column rows. And they only say this is because this is something that kind of always, at least once or twice a year, comes up. And then we always just now say oh, we have a gear, we just put it on here that we use this pattern from Bootstrap or Material or whatever. So you, the user, can turn on and turn off the columns as they want. Is that good? Okay, then we can proceed. So, and that diffuses that conversation.
Eventually that degree of customization becomes some sort of convention if it's applied everywhere else, right? So Your idea, like what you guys do with the tables, is frankly like fascinating. I'm gonna steal it because we don't do that with ours, but it's such a great idea. But it's probably just because it hasn't become convention to this point in the way that, I don't know, being able to skin your character in a video game is, right? It's almost weird that if you have any kind of avatar in a game that you can't dress them a certain way. We're not talking about personalization in the biz. That is something different. It's usually the personalization of data.
You put your finger right on it. Actually, the word is customization versus personalization.
Yeah,
That's what it is. I can make in any video game. Most video games will let you say, okay, at the beginning, you're making your character. Before you give them a name, you can customize what the avatar looks like, right? Skin color, hairstyle, clothes, whatever, how wide their nose is, how, all that kind of stuff. And I will say out there, for bald, bearded men like myself, there's not a lot of options in most games. Because I want to make bald, bearded men, and they don't ever let you do that in Pokemon. You always have to be young and have... Anyways, that's a total side gripe right there.
Your spiky hair.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, I would rather have bald and a nice beard instead of face tattoos or blue hair, So, because I want to see myself, but that is personalization, right? Mm-hmm. That is not customization. And I think if we kind of look at customization as applied to games, we've now reached a time where I think everyone, it doesn't matter what the app is, the web app, enterprise software application, native app, whatever, everyone expects a light and dark mode now. Just because everyone has different preferences and time at times a day, depending on light, you want to see, this would be better with a black background and lighter text, or this is better with a light background, and I've noticed that kind of customization is something that people want. And all the time now. It's just, and I think it's because browsers are doing it. Your phone does it. Google Maps does it automatically, but you can toggle back and forth because it actually does it, based on the sunset, Mm-hmm. And your phone does it based on the light and availability. Another customization that I think from the game side is, and I mentioned Monster Hunter because I know that it does this, but because Monster Hunter Rise just came out and I'm kind of cracked up and playing on it all the time right now. But in general, in all the Monster Hunters, and this is something that you may be familiar with, I can customize my HUD. I can move around where my health bar is. I can move around where my map is. I can turn things on my HUD on and off, or I can move them. And that's something that I think a lot of games are starting to move to because they realize that, hey, I don't need the map, or I don't want it, or I want a minimal experience. Or there are in gaming, I think more so than the software side, they've embraced customization, and now it's kind of an expectation that I think it's kind of bleeding over into apps, web apps, enterprise software applications.
Are we perhaps talking about something that we might call context customization, being the ability to tailor an interface for context? And that context is sometimes external, the time of day, or occupational. I am an operator, not an accountant, or I have many windows on my screen, many tabs open, many whatever. And we're not talking about and it's to differentiate from personalization, which is I want to see myself in experience. I want your newsletter to greet me with "Hi, Michael," or I want this character to be bald and bearded, like both of us. And but what we're customizing and allowing for and designing for is context. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I guess that makes me think of a couple things. I think it's already there. It's already out there because frameworks have it, right? Sure. And so Bootstrap already has built into it a light and dark theme, right? That lets you, whenever you're building your web app or your website or whatever, you can just kind of toggle them back and forth. They have that built into the framework. A lot of work that we build in my 9 to 5 is they have to work in command center mode. Command center mode being like, this needs to work on multiple screens, multiple monitors. And so one of the frameworks that we use a lot or adapt or kind of, there's many frameworks that do this, don't get me wrong, but Golden Layout is one. I'm not sure if anyone has like checked out the Golden Layout framework, but the Golden Layout framework lets you completely customize your UI, drag and drop, stack. It treats everything like tabs. I can pop out those tabs into new windows onto different monitors. I can pop out a group of tabs onto a new monitor.
Wow.
And I can pop them back in. Yeah, it's pretty slick. It's a pretty slick, kind of framework. And so I think, I can say that the need is already there and we're working with it. And the sign is that if the frameworks are already supporting it already, then that means that the demand is there, if that makes sense. And I definitely think that it is context, because someone who is running a hospital command center where they have 20 monitors, right? And I need video feed on the parking lot. So when the ambulances arrive and on the life flight chopper as it flies someone in, but I also need a screen that shows bed boards, that shows how many people are currently in our ER and how many people are waiting for OR, and then we can move them around. And when, okay, now we have a bed on the floor that's freed up, so we can move someone from ER to, normal. I mean, that's a command center, and that requires multiple screens. And so, yeah, I think it is kind of context. It's like people need screens, people need controls, people need that wiggle room to configure what they need. And where I know we talked in a previous episode about being pissed off with games don't let you invert your y-axis, I think that's just you're shooting yourself in the foot, kind of at this point, if you're not, because everyone's kind of expecting that contextual customization.
Yeah, to your point, this sort of context customization is also probably fundamentally interwoven with designing for inclusivity, right? So the context perhaps being personal, right? Something to do with your abilities at the time, in as much as occupational. And I think you're right. I think the expectations either for gamers or users of the internet is one where your ability to customize for context is what was I saying? Yeah, that expectation there is growing. This is a snowball essentially from, I think almost 10 years ago, if not more, the advent of responsive design, right? Where you are designing responsively for the context of the person's screen size. And now that has just dovetailed into all sorts of other contexts. It's this kind of like unspoken awareness that the user experiences does not happen inside a bubble. It is impressed upon from all sorts of different aspects of an ecosystem, whether that ecosystem is involves something that you were born with or a job that you are employed in doing, or whatever. It requires that ability to adapt the tool that you've decided to use to shifting contexts, and those contexts may actually even change throughout the period of a day or an hour. Maybe you're in command center mode for X reason for a little bit, and then you have to walk away and use it again on your phone, right? There are things like this that are fundamentally very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when response RESS responsive server side or just responsive web design RWD, kind of came around, and it was like, oh no, this is totally affecting the web and everything will change based on this. And now when I look at like, oh, it works on different squares. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what about if it's light or dark? What if it needs to be on 14 squares? What if it needs to be, the user needs to adjust this widget or adjust this view? Because that seemed to be like such a big deal back in like 2008 to 2010, right? And now it's just like the expectation is more. It needs to work with people and work for them.
Command center mode. I never heard about that before. That is fascinating. I'm going to use this term.
Thank you for listening to the Design Thinking Games podcast. To connect with your hosts, Michael or Tim, please go to designthinkinggames.com, where you can request topics, ask questions, or see what else is going on. Until next time, game on.